Hello guys, Alan here and welcome back to the channel. This video brings us to part 2 of our concrete structures series inside of Revit, and in this video we are going to be talking about rebar modeling. We are going to be modeling out rebars inside of Revit, and I'm going to show you guys how you can actually achieve that in the Revit software. So before we get started, please, if you're watching this video and you haven't liked or subscribed to my channel, please do make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. It's going to help me out a lot. It's not going to cost you anything. Just make sure you hit on the subscribe button below this video and just subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on tutorials like this in here. So we are going to get started. I'm not going to waste too much time. So in the previous part, we're in the part 1 of our concrete structure series, we kind of modeled this structure out. All right, we modeled this kind of like building out in there, where we placed in all of these column parts and we placed in these columns, and we also have in here the structural slab, and we also have our structural wall in there, and we also have our structural beams also in there as well. All right, so I think we placed in the beams to kind of connect all of these parts in there, but I just took them off for the purpose of this tutorial. You can leave them in there if you want, but I just decided to take mine off. Right, so I'm going to show you guys how we can actually start to model out all of these rebars, the steroids, and all of those tricks and tips you need inside of the Revit software. All right, so we are going to get started, and before we get started, now if I should just click on any of the structure columns, right, I want you to pay attention to what's going to happen. Let me just kind of like extend this project browser, because in this video we are going to really extend this, because we are going to be reading a lot of stuff in here. Right, so we are going to get started. So now if I should just click on this pad right there, you're going to notice in here in the project, in the properties panel in there, and you head straight to structural. All right, you're going to notice in here we have the rebar cover. All right, so we have the top face rebar cover in there, and you notice we just have just one type of rebar cover in there. Right, you notice in there with the cover, the rebar cover bottom face, you notice also in here we just have just one type of rebar cover in there. Right, so now what are rebar covers? So rebar covers are like that part of your element where the rebars or the bars inside of this structural column are not going to go out in. All right, so they are not going to go above the rebar cover, so all your bars or your rebars are going to stay within that rebar cover. All right, so you're going to understand that in a second. So if I should click on any of them in here, so if I should click in here on this column in here, you're going to notice with the rebar cover, with the top face, it's kind of like grayed out. All right, but if I should click in here, you're going to notice with the top face we have that in there. Now I just want you to pay attention to what's happening in here. So with the top rebar cover, with the top face for this column, you're going to notice is grayed out in there. We can't actually put anything. That is because we have a slab. All right, that is because we have a slab sitting right at the top face. So the top face is right at the top in there. All right, so that's where like our slab is sitting exactly on, so we can't really do anything in there. That is why it's grayed out, and you can see that in there. Right, so if I should just bring out a column, make sure I'm in the structure tab and just click on column in there, and if I should just 3D snapping and just place a vertical column in there, and yes, just place this column in there. If I should select that, you're going to notice with the rebar cover top face, we have the rebar cover in there, and we can now actually set that up. All right, so this is perfect. I'm going to delete this out of the way now. So we just have just one type of rebar cover in there. All right, so if you want to set up more rebar covers, or you want to have different types of rebar cover, so with this is just 25 millimeters on each side. All right, so if you want to set up more rebar covers, it's pretty much simple. Just make sure you head straight into the structure tab. All right, just make sure you're in the structure tab. You come in here into this reinforcement panel, just click on that, and you're going to notice we have in here rebar cover settings. All right, so you can click on that rebar cover settings in there, and you notice in here we just have that 25 millimeters. You remember in here we had that one by is greater than 25 millimeters in there. All right, so we can add more rebar covers in there, so I'm going to add more rebar cover 2 in there, and with this I'm going to leave this at 50. Okay, let me do this 40. Let's see what I can do with that. I'm going to leave this at 40. I'm going to add one more, and I'm also going to change this to 50, and I'm going to add one more, and I'm going to change this to 60. All right, so we've now created several rebar covers in there, so we can actually work with that. All right, so you just have to click on OK in here, and you finish out of there. So if I should click on this column in here, and I should head into any of the rebar covers in there, you're going to notice we now have the luxury of selecting different types of rebar covers in there. All right, so we can do the same for this as well. We can set that up and also set up different rebar covers in there. All right, so now that is how we can create all of those simple rebar covers in there, and we are going to start off. All right, so in this tutorial I'm not going to be doing all of the rebars for every single thing you see in here, right? I'm going to give you guys an assignment. So if you're done with your assignment, you can actually send it to me through an email, or you can contact me through my socials in there. You're going to see that in the description of this video. So yeah, we are going to get started. I'm going to be doing just some of these rebars in there, and it's pretty much the same process. Then you apply that same knowledge to actually finish up with everything in there, and you can send me an email and I can see what you've done, and yes, so we are good to go. We are going to get started now. So now what you'd want to do when you are starting to create in your rebars, all right, you would want to create some sort of like different sections through your model, all right, that you can actually use it to actually work with. So you'd like to create different sections in each of the models, so you can pay attention and see the details of what is happening inside of your model. So I'm going to create some sections in there where we can actually use that to manipulate our way throughout this entire tutorial, this video. All right, so I'm going to go straight into the foundation plan, because we're going to start with the column parts in there, and I'm going to draw a section through this column right here. So I'm just going to click on that section arrowhead in there. So just make sure you are in this panel. Like I said in most of my videos, some of you are going to see this your panel right above in here, right? So you can go up there, so don't be confused if you see mine here. I just click on that drop down menu, and I usually always keep that at the bottom in here. Right, so yeah, we are going to get started. So just make sure you click on that section head in there, and we're going to draw a section through that. So I'm going to click here and draw that section, and perfect. Alright, so we are done placing in that section, and we have that section in there. If you should come into the project browser and you see that in here, projects sections, just click on that drop down menu, and you notice in here we have that section in here. So our section doesn't come all the way to the column. I want it to come all the way in there to the columns in there, and we have that in here. Alright, so this is perfect, so I can actually see what's happening in here anytime I place the rebars in there. Alright, so I'm going to go back into my foundation plan. Let me see if I can create more sections. So let me get into the 3D view. Alright, so I have a section running through in here, which is perfect. I think that's fine, and I'll need one more section like cutting through this in here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head into any of the elevation views in there, and I'm in that elevation view now. Let me just go into the south elevation. All right, so the south elevation is perfect, and we are going to draw a section also through in here. So let me just click on that section in here, and I'm going to create, I'm not going to create a section, I'm going to create a detail in there. All right, so I'm going to draw that detail all the way in here, and I'm going to change the direction of that. All right, this is facing up. I want it to face down because I want to see the rebars I'm going to place inside of all of this column parts and this column structure in there. All right, so I'm going to change the direction to face downwards. All right, so if you want to look up, you can actually change that to also look up in there. All right, so I'm going to crank this up to bring this a little bit in there, and I'm going to bring that view all the way up in here. All right, so I'm going to keep the view somewhere around here. All right, so if I was done, and I'm going to move that also down in here, so it's going to view just this portion. All right, so I have that in here by creating that detail view, so you can see it's in here, detail 0, which is perfect. So I'm going to head back into the foundation plan, and there we go. So we are done with that, and we need to start placing in our rebars in there. All right, so with this, I'm going to move into the detail. I'm going to move into that detail view in here, and I have that detail view in here. So we have this column in here where we can place in all of those rebars in there. All right, so we are going to start placing in our rebars in there. And to place in a rebar, what you can actually do is you can actually select this, and you're going to notice in here in this reinforcement tab in here, we have at the top in here rebar. All right, so you can place that in, or what you can do is, if you just always make sure you're in the structure tab. All right, so we're in the structure tab now, and you're going to notice in here we have structural rebar in there. All right, so we can actually click on that, and we are good to go. So you're going to notice we have in here some sort of like a warning. It's not a warning actually, it's just some sort of like an info for you to actually keep in mind. All right, so it says in here the rebar shape definitions will include hooks and will ignore end treatments. All right, these options can be changed under reinforcement settings and should be set before adding any rebar elements to the project. All right, so I'm going to explain why we have this in here. All right, so I'm going to click on OK in there, and it says no rebar shape family is loaded in the project. Would you like to load one? Of course, we should be able to load some of the rebar shapes in there, so we can actually use those rebar shapes in there. So I'm going to click on yes, I would love to load one in there, and by default Revit is going to send us into the imperial system of measurement, and you can see it in here, the English imperial, which I am not going to use that. So I'm going to click on this and go a few folders back and just click on English in there, and after clicking on English in there, I'm going to make sure I find let's make sure we find in here not the couplets. Let me change this to a list view in there, and perfect. All right, so we have it in here, structural rebar shapes. All right, so I'm going to click on structural rebar shapes, and you're going to notice we have a whole lot of rebar shapes in there. Let me just extend this, bring this down a little bit. So you're going to notice we have a lot of rebar shapes in here. Right, so I can't really see the type of shape, and I don't really know what these numbers represent and their type of shapes in there. So now one way you can load, so we need to make sure we load all of these shapes in there because they are going to come in very handy. Maybe we might not be using a particular shape and we are going to need some other shapes. It's going to be very helpful. So what you can do is just make sure you select this and just scroll all the way down and hold down your shift key and select this in there, and it's going to make a broad selection of everything in there. Right, so I learned this trick from Barkan Architect. All right, I never really knew this until Barkan Architect really taught me how to use that. So it's just kind of like a simple trick. So just make sure you click on the first one and go to the bottom one, hold down your shift key, click on that, and it's going to make a broad selection of everything, and you can just click on open in there, and Revit is going to load all of those shapes inside of our project. All right, so let's just wait a couple seconds. Let's wait for a couple seconds. Let's make sure that loads in there, and perfect. So now we are good to go. We have our rebar shapes inside of the Revit software. So now we need to set up that rebar shape. So when you come in here into the modify, you're going to notice in here we have place rebar. All right, so if I should click on that drop down menu in here, you're going to notice we have all of those types of the rebar shapes we loaded in. Now I'm not a structural engineer, so I'm not sure I know what all of these shapes and those codes or numbers looks like. So the structural engineers watching this video, you can drop a comment in the comment section and educate us on what this actually represents, or maybe it's just to just show that by default in Revit. All right, so you can enlighten us on that. So now one way we can actually see if if maybe this shape is actually the exact shape we need. All right, one way you can actually see that is you're going to notice in here we have these three dots in there. All right, we have these three dots in there. So what you can do is you can just click on those three dots in there, and you're going to notice Revit is going to open up a different kind of section for us. So I'm just going to extend this out a little bit. Let me open this up. Oh my, now my working area is becoming very small. I thought I had a huge screen until I opened this up. Let me just reduce this section a little bit in there. All right, so this is perfect. Okay, this is perfect. All right, so now we have all of the shapes in here. So if you can't really tell, so you notice in here with the M03, it looks like this shape, right? So if this shape is something that you'd want to use, you need to make sure you know that it's M03. All right, so you can just come in here, click in there, and then use that shape in here. So instead of us coming in here to kind of think what M03 looks like, we can click on those three dots, and Revit is going to give us another project browser where we can kind of like see the thumbnails of all of these shapes in there. Right, so now we are going to place for the we are going to look for a shape we can actually place for this columns we have in here. All right, so we have all of these shapes in there. So you notice we have all of these shapes in there. All right, let me just scroll all the way down and see what we have. And yes, so we just have all of the shapes in here. All right, so there are a lot of shapes in there you can use. All right, so now with this, the shape I'm going to be using is this. All right, so let me just escape out of there. I'll get back into the modify, and it's not going to. Okay, now it's escaped out of there. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the rebar cover. All right, so if I should click on this in there, and I should go into the rebar cover in here. With the rebar cover, other faces is set to 25 millimeters. All right, so I can change this to 40 in there, and we have that in there. All right, so if I should click on this in there, I've changed that rebar cover in there. Let me just head straight into the section in there, and let me just click on this in there, and let me change that rebar cover to about 50. All right, and I've changed that to 50. Let me do the same for all of these columns. Let me change and set some rebar covers in there. So these are going to be dependent on your regulation. All right, so some of you are going to want to do much more deeper rebar cover. So it depends on your regulation. All right, so with bottom face with a rebar cover, I'd want to make this with 40, and with the other faces I'm going to make this 60. All right, so I'm going to make this 60 with other faces. So that is how you can actually use those rebar covers. So you can come in here, rebar cover, and you're going to notice in here with the rebar cover, you're going to notice in here we have all of these green hyphenated lines in there. All right, so you're going to notice in here it's kind of like more inside. All right, it's got the green line is gone inside, unlike here in here. You notice with the rebar cover in here I haven't changed that. That is set to 25 millimeters. All right, so it means that our rebars are going to stay within the confines of this rebar cover. All right, so that was just by the way. All right, so now let's get out of there. Let's get back in here to our detail level for us to be able to place those rebars in there. So we are going to click on rebar and okay in there, and we are good to go. So now let's start placing in the rebars. So we have all of the shapes in here. I'm going to click. We still have our project browser opened up for us, which is perfect. Revit is going to remind and open all of those rebar covers. So I'm going to use this one. Let me just find the particular right shape to use. See, I'm going to use this one. All right, so I'm going to click on this one in there, and when I bring it in here inside of this in there, with this I have a very reduced rebar cover. I brought it to like about 60. Let me bring it here. Let me see. So you notice in here it's kind of like open small. All right, so now you're going to notice when I move my mouse pointer around, the direction of the hook placement actually changes in there. Right, you're going to notice it's changing in there. Right, so what you can actually do is I think you can hit on the space bar on your keyboard, and it actually changes the direction of your hook. So if you want that direction to actually be maybe on this side, if you want it to be on this side, you can just make sure you just hold your mouse pointer steadily in there. Just place your mouse pointer steadily in there, and you can just move it to the particular direction you want. So I'm going to leave it on this direction, and I'm going to place it in there. All right, so we have this placed in there. Now let me get into a section, and let's see what we have, and let's see where's that detail. Okay, what? All right, so this is that rebar in here. You're not going to see that now because it's just going to be like a straight line. If I should head into the 3D view, and if I should just click on this, it's not visible in this one. Okay, that's it in there. All right, so you're going to notice we have that rebar inside of this hook in there. All right, so we have this in there inside of this hook. All right, so this is just by the way. We need to change that and make it very visible. All right, so I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to change this detail level view into I'm going to change this to fine. And when I change that to fine, you're going to notice we have that now showing in a 3D form. All right, we have it like visible in a 3D form. All right, so it's not going to be just like a straight line. All right, so now if I should head back into the 3D view in there and just click on that in there, you're going to notice it's still having that straight line in there. So don't worry about that. Let me just get back in here, and let me get back into the section view. All right, with the section view, we can just make sure we change this to fine in there, and we have that rebar in there. All right, so this is that our rebar in there. So now you notice we just have just one rebar placed in there, and it's kind of like placed just on this detail section view. All right, and we kind of want the rebar to go all the way through this column in there. All right, so we can actually do that. That is because we just set this up to single. So when you click on that rebar in there, what you want to do is you'd want to head straight into the top of this rebar set in there, and you're going to notice it's set to single. Right, so you can select any of these types that you want. So you can just change that to a fixed number. So let's say if you want it to just be just 10 bars in there, all right, just 10 of those shapes in there, you can set it to a fixed number, and then you just set the quantity in there. All right, so you can change that to whichever part you want. So I'm going to set this as maximum spacing, and I'm going to change the maximum spacing, the intervals, to be at I'm going to do this at 200 millimeters, and perfect. So I'm going to click in there, and you're going to notice now we have those rebars in there which are set to 200 millimeters on the maximum spacing. All right, so with the maximum spacing, it's just going to set from the beginning to the bottom in there. It's just going to make sure it spaces all of those rebars in there with the spatial difference of 200 millimeters. All right, so now we have that in there. Let me get into the 3D view, and if I should click in here, you're going to notice we have all of those rebars in there. All right, so we have all of those rebars in there placed perfectly. All right, so now in the 3D view, I kind of want to see all of those rebars because I can't see them. They are just in the wall, and I really want to see those rebars and how they are coming off. So what you can do in the 3D view is you can just make sure you make a broad selection of everything in your 3D view in there, and you head straight into the filter tab. All right, so when you head straight into the filter tab, just make sure you check none. Oops, okay, just make sure you check every single thing in there, and just make sure you only uncheck. Let me bring this up so you guys can see that. So just make sure you check every single thing, and make sure you only uncheck the structural rebar in there. All right, just make sure you only uncheck the structural rebar in there. Hit on apply and hit on OK in there, so the structural rebar is unchecked. All right, and then what you can do now is just right click in there, get to override graphics in view by element, and then you can crank up the transparency to about 85. It's perfect. Hit on apply in there and hit on OK. All right, so this is perfect. So now we have that in there, so we can now see our rebars in there. All right, now in this view, you're going to notice our rebars are still coming off like a straight line. We kind of want it to be in a 3D form where we can actually see what's happening. So what you can do is you can just select those rebars in there, and make sure you head into your properties panel in there, And when you're in the properties panel, head straight to the graphics tab. With the view visibility states, just click on edit in there, and you're going to notice in here in the 3D view, you just make sure you check this and check this as well. Hit on OK in there, and perfect. So now we have that rebar coming off perfectly, just as we want it to. So now we are going to continue to place in some more rebars. We are going to continue to place in some more rebars. So now what we can do now is we need to head back into that detail level view and place in more rebar. So we are going to go back in here to detail 0. That's where we actually are working with this. So I'm just going to do just this part, and you guys, and then I'll do the floor slab, and I'm going to do the wall as well, and I'm going to do a beam, and then you guys can actually do the rest. All right, you guys can do the rest by yourselves, and that's the assignment I'm going to give all of my audience out there. All right, so now we're going to place in more rebar. So what we can do now is just click on rebar, and let's extend our project browser view in there. So Revit is going to remember the last shape you actually placed in there, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the top and just place a vertical rebar. All right, this one, I'm going to place this one in there. So I'm going to click on that, and when you click on that in here, now you're going to notice in here we have some options in here. All right, so we have place to work plane, which is actually, you notice in here when it's set to place to work plane, it's actually placing that horizontally, right, to the work plane in there. And we don't want this to go horizontally, we kind of want it to go vertically, all right, to the bottom. All right, so this is just placing this kind of like horizontally, which is kind of wrong for us. So what you can do is you can go in here to place to cover, and you can choose to perpendicular in there. All right, so we have this now going just like a dot. All right, since we are in the section view, we want to see that as a dot, so it's kind of like going to the bottom. All right, it's going to be like a straight line in there. And with this, you don't have to actually place this to actually set up the quantity in there. So while you are actually placing this in there, you can still set this up. So we can set this up to maximum spacing, and I can just change that in there, the maximum spacing, or I can change this to fixed number, and I can just put a quantity in there of 3. All right, so if I come in here, I can put that in there to 3. And you notice when I move the mouse pointer, let me just zoom in a little bit, I'm just panning around a little bit in there. So when I move the mouse pointer kind of like inside in there, it kind of like brings the bottom to the edge in there. If I move this, is bring this to the center. So just kind of play around with that. All right, so you guys, if you're following along with every step, you can actually see this in there. So I'm just going to place this here, and perfect, and I'm going to move this also here and place this in there. And with this portion, I kind of like just want 2. All right, one should be here and then one should be here. So I'm going to change the quantity in here to 2, not 22, just 2. All right, so this is perfect, and I'm going to move this ahead just on this direction. All right, this is perfect, and I can just place this in here, escape out of there, select this, and I can move this to just about the center in there. So this is perfect. And now let's head into our 3D view. Let's see what's happening in there. So get into the 3D view, and you notice we have those, and you notice in here we have all of those rebars. We have those rebars placed in there. All right, so in just like we did for this ones, you notice they are still showing it like a straight line. So we just need to make sure we select all of them. So just hold down the control key and select all those placed types in there, and head into the graphics tab in there on the project, on the properties panel, and click on edit in there, and just make sure you check the view on obscure and the view as solid. All right, so hit on OK in there, and perfect. So now we have those rebars in there. All right, so this is perfect. We have this placed in there, which we want, and it's kind of perfect in there. All right, so now we are going to move on to this column part in there, where we're going to place in those rebars for this part in there. All right, so we are going to get started, and what we want to do now is we need to go into the section view, and then we'll kind of like place that in there. So I think my section cuts through that. All right, so we have this in here, and this, yes, so this is that section in here where it cuts through this rebar in there. So this is perfect for me, and I would like to place in that rebar in there. So I'm in that section view now, and I'm going to go into the rebar tab in here, which is perfect, and I'm going to extend my project browser view in there, and I'm going to make sure I find the right, okay, this one is going to work for me for this column part in there. And let me just find, let me see if they have something much better in there. Okay, I've scrolled all the way down, and I think that shape is actually better for me. So I'm going to make sure I find that shape in there, instead of me to come in here to actually see the number of, and just click and guess which one is the right one. All right, you can just click on those three dots, and then you are going to have this thumbnail in there. All right, so this is perfect, and I'm going to use this shape. All right, so just click on this shape in there, and when I bring this shape in here, you're going to notice in here it's, let me change this shape. Let me use a much more bigger one. All right, this one. Yeah, this is perfect. All right, so you're going to notice in here it's not showing to the right kind of view for me. Since this is a section, I kind of want it to be like a bow, like same as this shape symbol is. So with this, we are going to change this to place parallel to work plane in there. And if you are on a plan view, you're going to notice it's going to go horizontally, and with this, you're going to place parallel to work plane. So this is perfect for me. All right, so before we set this up, I'm going to set this to maximum spacing, and I'm going to do this 150 and 150 in there. I'm going to set this up at 150 with maximum spacing and click in there. All right, so this is perfect. Escape out of there and head into the 3D view, and we have that in there. All right, so this is perfect for us. I can click on this and get back into the graphics tab, click on edit, and make sure I check all of these up to see what I have in there, and this is perfect. All right, so we have those rebars for the column parts in there. All right, so now we kind of like want to place another one just on these ones. All right, we want another one to go in the adjacent direction of that. So with this I'm going to want to create a section through the other direction. So let me just get into the foundation plan in there, and you're going to notice in here we have that rebars cover showing in there. So we are going to want to place a section through this way, so we can use that one to actually place those ones in there. So I'm going to draw a section through this way and bring this up a little bit, and this is perfect. So just click on that, and I don't want this to be a detail view, I want it to be a building section. I want that to be a building section in there, and I'm going to bring this all the way somewhere around here. All right, so this is perfect, and I know that section is detail 1. All right, so we have that in here. This is perfect. All right, so we have that section in here, and I'm going to bring this all the way up a little bit for us. So we are going to place in that rebar and get our rebars to fit to the other direction. All right, so we are going to click on rebar, and we are going to still use the same one and parallel to work plane. And with this, I'm going to change this to maximum spacing, and I'm still going to do my 150 in there, not 150. And I'm going to place that rebars in here. All right, so escape out of there, and it's placed in there. So let's get into the 3D view and let's see what we have. We are going to select that, and with the graphics tab, head into edit, and we can make sure we check this, hit on OK in there, and there we go. So now we have those rebars in there for us, and this is perfect. All right, so we have these rebars in there, which is perfect. It's perfect, and we have that in there. Now some of you guys are going to want to like draw the rebar to kind of like anchor with this bars, bottom bars in there. All right, so that's one thing you can also do. You can make sure you draw that to also anchor with those rebars in there. We can actually draw that in there. So what you can do is you can also go in here, select this actual rebar in here, and you can go into edit sketch. All right, and then we can click on this, we can bring this down in here, and then we can click on this, and we can just draw this to kind of like anchor with that in there. Escape out of there, and we can finish this, and always make sure you save your project. All right, always make sure you save your project. So if you want this to actually go all the way to the bottom, you can move this to actually anchor with the bottom part in there. Let me head into the 3D view. Let's see what we have in there. So you're going to notice those ones are going all the way to the bottom, and they are kind of like anchoring with that, so it doesn't fall off. Realistically, yes, so it doesn't fall off. So you can do the same thing for all of these bars in there. Just make sure you click on them, and you can go into edit extrusion, and then you can extend that, and then it anchors with that, which is just perfect. So I'm going to cancel out of there, and that's just an assignment for you guys to do because of the tutorial. I don't want this tutorial to be too long enough, so you guys will be able to watch everything. All right, so that is how you can actually do that in there. So I'm going to move on to the slab, all right, where we can actually place rebars for our structural slabs in there. All right, so with that, we are going to be doing what we call the area reinforcement. All right, so with this, I'm going to want to go into the ground floor tab, the ground floor slab in there, and I'm going to want to do that with this slab in there, where we are going to place in all of the steroids and all of those bars, rebars for the slab in there. Right, so this is pretty much simple. So what you want to do is you'd want to make sure you go into this area tab in there, which is the area enforcement tab, after you selected this. All right, so when you click on that, you're going to have this one. It says no structural symbols are loaded in. All right, you can actually load some in. So let me just cancel out of there, and no, let me just cancel out of there. So let me show you guys how you can load that in, so you don't always have that warning in there. All right, so what you can do is just make sure you go into the insert tab and get into load families. All right, so when you get into load families, Revit is automatically going to remember we actually came into the structural rebar shapes. All right, so you're going to go a few folders back, and we are going to get into annotations, and with annotations we are going to go into structural, and you're going to notice in here we have the M area reinforcement, I think the first 5 as our area reinforcement. So what you're going to do now is just select the first one, hold down your shift key and select the last one, and we're going to make a broad selection of all of those, and just click on OK in there and load all of those area reinforcements inside of the software. So we are good to go now, and we can now start to place in for the slabs. All right, so I'm going to do for the slabs, I'm going to work and actually place that for the slabs, and we'll do one for the walls as well. Yeah, we'll do the one for the walls as well. So this is perfect. All right, so now let's start in. So when you click on that slab in there, and you go into this reinforcement panel, and you click on that area in there, you notice we no longer have that warning in there. All right, so we now have the chance to actually draw out our reinforcement. So I'm going to start off by using the pick line tools. So I'm going to pick this, I'm going to pick this line, I'm going to pick this line, and with this I'm going to pick it here, I'm going to pick this here, I'm going to pick this here, and pick this here. So let me just trim and extend all of those edges, because this is going to be like a shaft, right? I don't want it going all the way in here. So I'm going to click one here and TR on my keyboard to trim all of this together. All right, so this is trimmed together, and you can select all of these. All right, just let's make a broad selection. Let's see what we have. All right, so we have this all placed in there. All right, these are all placed inside there, and with our major direction. All right, some of you guys are going to have your major direction. Maybe this one you see in here with the 3 lines is actually this one. So if you wanted to go, if you want your rebars to actually go like this way horizontally, all right, you want them to go horizontally this way, you need to make sure you set the major direction to come in here, and your rebars are going to follow that direction. All right, they are going to go all like this way. All right, if you want them to go vertically this way, go vertically this way, you need to make sure you change that major direction to this way, and it's going to follow this way. So with this, I'm going to want them to go horizontally, like I'm going to want them to go vertically, all right, like this way. All right, so I'm going to leave it this way, and I'm going to click on finish in there, and you're going to notice in here we have that symbol in here with our rebars in there. All right, so we have this placed in there. So what we can do now is let's go into our 3D view, And when we head into our 3D view, you're going to notice in here we have those rebars placed in there. All right, so let me just kind of zoom in to just a single edge, kind of like an edge in there. So now you're going to notice when I move my mouse pointer, we have the option of selecting just the top bars. You're going to notice it's coming in two forms. All right, one on the top and then one at the bottom. All right, so when I hover my mouse pointer right in there, you're going to notice we have the option of selecting all of those ones on the top, and we have the option of selecting all those ones at the bottom. But when you move your mouse pointer to the center, you kind of like have that plane in there. So when you select that plane, it's going to select actually everything in there. All right, so let's just go into the graphics tab, get into edit, and with this, let's just change that and let's hit on apply in there, and we are good to go. All right, so we have those showing in a solid form in there. All right, so we have those rebars in there, which is perfect for us. We have all of this area reinforcement in there for this rebar, which is also perfect for us. So we are going to start off when I select let me just select all of these in there. All right, so if I should select all of these in there, let me just bring this up a little bit. Let me bring this out here, and let me open this up a little bit. All right, so this is perfect. Let me zoom this back a little bit. All right, okay, so this is perfect. So now when you head into the properties panel in there, if you look into your properties panel in there, you're going to notice with the layers, all right, we have the top major direction. All right, so it's going to with the top major direction, you're going to notice we have two sections. We have the top and then we have the bottom. All right, you notice is the bottom starts from this one in there, bottom starts from here, and with the top it starts from here. All right, so I told you when I zoomed in a little bit, you're going to notice we have one at the top and then we have one at the bottom. All right, so the bottom ones are for these ones and the top ones are for the top ones in here. All right, so with the top ones, so you can, there are a lot of settings in here you can do to actually change that. So with the top major direction in there, if I should just click on this and uncheck that, you're going to notice in there top bars major direction are gone. If I select this, bring this back, you're going to notice they are now visible in there. So with the top major bar type, you notice in here we have structural rebar 1. all right, so we have several rebar types you can actually choose. Like I said earlier on, I'm not a structural engineer. I just kind of know how the Revit software thinks. All right, so I just know how to use the Revit software to the highest level. All right, so yes, and we have these several rebars in there. All right, the types. So if you want the top major bar to be, let's say I want that to be 16 mm. 16 mm. I really don't know which type you use. So if you're a structural engineer, just comments in the comment section the particular type you are going to use for that. And then with the top major hook type, I'm going to talk about that. And then now let's move to the top major spacing, which is 300. So you can actually change the spacing for just the top one. All right, so you can change the spacing. If you want the top ones to be 150, you want the bottom ones to be, let's say, 300, and all of that, you can change that. And then with the top minor bar, like the top minor bar, which is the one beneath this top one, just that bar. All right, you can also change that one. So let's say that one I want it to be, I made the first one 16, let's say that one I want it to be 13 mm. all right, and that's perfect. So now I'm going to move to the bottom one and also change maybe the bottom one. I'm going to make this one, I'm going to make this one 22 mm, and I'm going to change the bottom minor bar one, I'm going to change that one to maybe something like I made that 22, let me make that one a bit higher. All right, so I'm going to make that 25 mm. all right, so I'm just going to hit on apply, and you're going to notice in there we have those rebars in there. So this is based on the diameter of those rods. All right, it's based on those rods. If you're in Ghana, we call this iron rods. All right, when you go to site, they say, Charlie, pass me the iron rods. All right, so we have these iron rods in there. All right, so those rods in there, those rebars in there. And so we've been able to set up the various types in there. All right, so if I should, let me just come in here, click on this also in here. If you click on that one also in there, yeah, if we click on that, we have in here the shape which is set to 0, and yes, we want to use that shape. Of course, we want to use that shape. And let me see if we can change that. So yes, so you can change the diameter in there. All right, you can change the diameter by coming in here. So we have the bar length in there. You can change the diameters also in there. All right, so this is just by the way. So I'm going to escape out of there, and I'm going to get back into our slab. All right, so now let's start off. So we can make sure we select that, and we've been able to specify all of those rebar types. All right, those area reinforcement and those rebar types in there. All right, we've been able to select all of that. Now one more thing is that some of you guys might want to actually place a hook. All right, so this one can actually hook into like this beam and the column. All right, so we would want to place like some sort of like a hook. So it's very simple, you can place those hooks. All right, so you can select this in there, and after selecting that in there, you can make sure you go also in here. All right, so with that selecting the entire thing, I'm going to make sure I use the bottom one. All right, so with the bottom minor hook, or I can still use the, yes, I would have to use the bottom minor hook. So with the hook, you're going to notice in here we have some types of hooks in there. So we have the rebar 90. Let me show you what that looks like. Okay, let me tilt this to the edge. Let's see what we have. So we have that 90 hook in there, and let me bring this to standard 90, and this is going to go even much deeper, and standard 180. So you can actually duplicate and create different types of hooks that you want. So here you're going to notice it's going to come like an anchor, or it's going to come like some sort of like an anchor in there. All right, it's coming off like an anchor. All right, so now with the hook, we kind of want it to face downwards. All right, we want it to go downwards. We don't want it hooking something up. All right, so in here, you notice in here we have the bottom minor hook orientation, and you can change that to down, and it's going to come down. And with this, I'm going to change this to 90, and I have that hook in there. All right, so this is perfect for me. I have that hook also in here. All right, so we can change that hook direction also in here as well. So you have the option of placing in hooks. All right, so it's kind of like anchors to the elements at the bottom in there. So now we are going to move on to the structural wall, and with the wall it's pretty much also the same thing, just as we did for our floor slabs and all of those slabs in there. All right, so with the wall we can actually do the same thing. All right, when we head into structure and we go into rebar in there, so you notice in here I'm trying to place that by using the 3D view. All right, and we have in here the form of us to sketch the rebar, or we can use the free form. So with the free form is when you have like a shape that is going like Zaha Hadid's architecture. If you have that kind of form, and with all of that, with how you can place all of those rods. So with the free form, I'm not going to touch that in this series. That's going to be something off the grid. So if you want to still study about the freeform ones, you can send me an email, and I'll do well, and it's going to come at a fee. So you can send me an email, and I'll do what to teach you how to use the freeform one. All right, so with this, I'm just going to show you guys how you can do the solid ones. All right, so this is perfect. So now I'm going to want to do it for the wall as well. I don't want to leave out something. So we've done for the column, and I've shown you guys you can actually extend this ones, all right, to come down, so they actually hook with this one. So I'm going to do it for the wall, and with the wall I'll also need to cut a section. With the wall I'm going to want to also cut a section. So okay, so I have that in here. This section is also going through the wall. All right, so I can click on that view in there, and it's going to open that up for me, and we have that wall here. So I can select this and move this up a little bit, and we have those rods also in there. All right, so this is perfect, and we're going to place in the rebar. So it's just coming off like the same thing. All right, the same thing we actually do. So I can even still do it in the 3D view. So with this, I'm going to want to click on area reinforcement, and then I'm going to click on that face, all right, the wall in there, and I'm going to use the pick line tools. All right, so you can just use the pick line. Just make sure you use the pick line in there and just pick all of those lines, pick line, and just come at the bottom right here and use the pick line. So you can trim and extend all of these together, trim and extend all of these together, trim and extend all of this together, trim and extend all of this together. And with the major direction, like I said, if you want it to go horizontally, you just make sure you select this major direction, and then when you use pick this line, all your bars are going to go this way. With this, I want them to go vertically in there. All right, so this is perfect, and you can finish this in there. And we have those hooks placed, those rebars for the wall in there. All right, the structural wall, which is going to serve as a lift. All right, so we have that in there. I can rush all the way into the graphics tab, get into edit, and I can make sure I check these and check these, click on OK, hit on apply, and I have these placed in there with these rebars in there. All right, so we have our rebars in there. You can actually select this and you can just extend this to kind of like hook with those other ones at the top in there. Let me get back into that section view, get back into that section, and this is it. I can't see that in this view. All right, so I can go back into the 3D view and just pan around a little bit and just click on that dot to move this up a little bit, so it kind of hooks with that in there. So with this, you notice with the rebar cover, it's kind of like very close, so you can actually change the rebar cover at any time, at any point in time you want. This is how you can actually create in you can model out all of those rebars inside of the software. All right, so this is how you can actually place in those rebars in there. All right, and there are a lot of tricks and tips you can actually use and do inside of the Revit software. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the rebar display. All right, so maybe sometimes in the 3D view you'd want to set up, let's say maybe you want the 12 mm to have different colors, and you would want the 10 mm to also have different colors, and you want to represent all of that with different colors. It's actually very simple. So now what every basic person would do is they just right click on that, get into select, get into override graphics in view, get into by element, and when they get into by element, you are going to want to specify a color for that. That's what every basic person would do. All right, so what you can do is you can create a filter. All right, you can create a filter tab where you can actually use that to actually bring out all of those colors in there. All right, so what you can do now is to create that filter in there. What you can do is you can head straight into the view tab. All right, you can head straight into the view tab, and you're going to notice in here we have the filter tab in there. All right, so you can click on that filter tab in there, and Revit is just going to give us, let me extend this a little bit, and Revit is going to give us this pop-up menu where it has some filter tab placed in there, and we can create in some filter tabs. All right, so you can click in here and then you can create a different filter tab. All right, so I'm going to call this rebar, 16. I'm going to call this rebar 16. All right, and I'm going to click on OK in there, and when you click on OK, just make sure you check none. Everything here is unchecked, and make sure you find your structural rebar. All right, just make sure you find that structural rebar. All right, perfect. So click on that structural rebar in there, and with this we kind of like want something that we can use to specify the color, which is definitely going to be the diameter. So we make sure we select the bar diameter, and with this we choose equals, and with this we can select the type of rebar we want. So we have the 16 mm, and we have the 16 mm in there, and we have the 12.7, and we have the 22.2, we have 25.4. all right, so this is the 16 mm. That's why I named this 16 rebar 16. All right, so you can click on that in there. And why do I have my Grammarly popping up in here? All right, so you can click on that and just hit on OK in there, come back in here, and you can duplicate that view. All right, so we duplicate that, and we can right click there, go into rename, and then we can call this the 12 mm. all right, so we can click on OK 12 and come back in here also and make sure you select that structural rebar in here and change this to the bar diameter, and with this equals, and with this we want it to be the 12. All right, so we come back in here, we can still duplicate that and just come here, duplicate, rename, and we can change this also to, and we have 22, so we have 22 in there, and come back also in here. So this is just the way, so just make sure you do this. You can skip if you want. So we can come in here and make sure we select structural rebar and come in here to select our bar diameter, come in here, change this to equals, and come in here, and this is our 22, and we can still go ahead, come back in here, duplicate that, and this is going to be the final one. All right, so we can go into rename, click right there, and we can change this to 25 and click on OK. Come down in here as well. So you should be very flexible with Revit, so you can use this filter to actually do anything if you are working in Revit, or you want to filter some things out with colors, all right, or anything that you want. So we need to make sure we find our structural rebar. Let's make sure we find that structural rebar in there. Just click on that, come in here and find our bar diameter, change this to equals, and perfect. We need to find that 25 in there. All right, so we are good to go. We can hit on apply and hit on OK in there, and nothing really happens. All right, we've created that filter and nothing really happens in there. So what you can do is you can head straight into the visibility graphics. All right, we can go into the visibility graphics override, click on edit in there, and you're going to notice at the bottom parts, at the top parts in here, we have the model categories, annotation categories, analytical model categories, and at the last part you notice we have filters. All right, so you can click on those filters in there, and when you click on those filters, we said no filters have been applied to this view. All right, so we can add filters, so we can click in there, and you notice we have the filters in there. So just select the first one, hold down your shift key, select the last one, click on OK, and it brings all of those filters in here for us. All right, so we can actually turn those filters off, right, which is kind of like very powerful and very perfect for us. So now with a line style, with that I'm not going to do that. So with the pattern in there is set to override, I can change this to solid, and make sure you change this to solid, and with the color we can specify this to red. All right, and this is perfect. We can hit on OK in there for that, and we can come back in here to pattern and change this to solid fill, and we can change this to green. All right, for our 12 mm. All right, so we have that in there. We can do the same thing for 22, so we can click on override, and we can come in here to solid fill, and we can change, let's give it a different color, blue in there, hit on OK, and let's do now for the bottom one, 25, click on that, change this to solid fill, and get into the color, and let's use this color, magenta color in there. All right, so we can click on OK, hit on apply, hit on OK in there, and there we go. So you're going to notice in here we have those colors showing for the different types of rebars that we used in there, which is kind of powerful. All right, we have those showing in there. So if I should head into the foundation, or if I should head into any of the section views, and I still want to show that, if I should head into any of the section views and I still want to show that color, all right, I still want to show those colors in there, I can actually do that as well. I can show those colors in there as well. Let me get into the ground floor plan. All right, if I should select this and change this is set to fine, I can actually see them in there. All right, so if I should head into any of the section view and still want to use the same color codes, all right, or you can go into a different view and still specify those different colors for it. But if I should head into maybe this view and I still want to use the same color codes for all of these in there, I can still do that. I can get back in here and I can create a template. All right, I can create a template for this in there. So you can go back into view in there, and then you have view templates. All right, then we can create a template view. All right, with the current template view, we can call this Rebar color codes if we want. We can call this a Rebar color, and I just click on OK in there, and we have all of this in there, all right, which is set to our 3D views, and we have the Rebar color. All right, so we can make sure we change this, and we need to go all the way, find 3D, and let's make sure we find something that is going to make us select those structural plants in there. All right, make sure we find the right filters, get into structural and floors, framing. I can go back into architectural floors area, and with the names, all right, so with the names, I can use a different name for that. So with the 3D views, we don't have anything in here. All right, 3D view, we have that Rebar color in there. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to uncheck everything in there and just leave out your view override filters. All right, this one. So you'd want to uncheck everything and leave out just those view override filters in there. And perfect. So we've created that template in there where we have that Rebar cover. All right, so we have that Rebar cover in there. So if I should go into any of the views, all right, and then I want to use that same color code, I can come in here to view overrides, apply current Rebar cover color codes in there. I can get into this, get into 3D, use this, and hit on apply properties and hit on OK, and those color codes are going to be showing inside of this view as well. This is not showing because we can't really see that in this form. All right, if we were to be having a slab, we would be able to see that. If we're having it more straight, I will be able to see that. So that is how you can apply those filters inside of the Revit software. All right, so I hope you found this video very interesting, and we are going to continue in the next part with some few stuffs in there. All right, we're going to continue in the next part where we are going to be talking some other stuff inside of the Revit software. So make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. I'll catch you guys in the next part. Peace out.
I'm still working real hard on a Saturday. A future I don't see from a mile away.